Thank you. Glad to be with you. Look, what North Carolina is doing is very exciting. It doesn't just affect North Carolina. Good ideas can spread to other states. Good ideas can be picked up even in Washington, D.C. I want to talk about sort of where we are in general in politics because it helps to understand how we got here and what we can do in the future. In the United States, we have a two-party system. Unlike Europe, some other countries, if you get 2% of the vote in some countries, you might be able to decide who the prime minister is, and you can wield a lot of power. In the United States, if you get 2% of the vote, you're officially a nut. You don't get to be a congressman, a senator, or president. You don't get to fly in Air Force One. You may get a radio talk show out of the deal. But we divide into two parties for a number of reasons, legal and others. And so if you care about something, you get organized into one of the two competing coalitions. Now, for a long time in the United States, the two parties were basically regional parties. And if somebody told you they were Republican, all you knew about them, all you were sure about them was that they were born north of the Mason-Dixon line. You didn't know whether they wanted higher taxes or lower taxes or any, or wanted to have wars or not have wars, or you had no idea anything about them except they were born north of the Mason-Dixon line. And we had little old ladies in Mississippi who agreed with Ronald Reagan on absolutely everything. And they voted for Georgia government because Sherman had been mean to Atlanta recently. Well, during the lifetime, you know people like this, right? What in the world are you thinking? But largely, during the lifetime of Ronald Reagan, we separated out the two parties on a more rational basis. If you want limited constitutional government, where individuals make more decisions and the government has less power to tell you what to do, you're a Republican. If you have a more expansive view of what the government should do and realize that really only the government can have some sense of whether you should be allowed 50-ounce Diet Cokes or not, then you're a Democrat, and your goal is to turn the United States into something between Greece and France. And those are two sort of worldviews, and they make sense, right? You can go one direction, you can go the other direction. And if somebody tells you they're a Republican or Democrat, you actually know something about them other than what city they were born in. So those are the two competing coalitions. Now, the center-right coalition, the Reagan Republican coalition, how did it get organized? What does it do? If you were to sit Republicans around a table, who's there? Okay, the two competing coalitions. Taxpayers, people who don't want government to raise their taxes. Property owners who don't want the government to take away their property rights. Homeschoolers, people who are willing to make the sacrifice to educate their own kids. And the Second Amendment community. I serve on the board of directors of the National Rifle Association. And again, we just simply wish to be left alone with our Second Amendment rights. You don't see people knocking on your doors on Saturday saying, you should be a hunter. They simply wish to be left alone. The Second Amendment community does not insist that public schools teach all fourth graders in the entire country books entitled Heather Has Two Hunters. They just wish to be left alone. That's it, leave us alone. We're not interested in you telling us how swell we are, just leave us alone. You have the small business community. Leave my professional life alone, my business life alone. Let me know. Just don't regulate or tax my business, my profession out of existence. And then you have the various communities of faith for whom the most important thing in their life is to practice their faith and transmit it to their kids. And they're not asking for Baptist stamps. They don't want everybody to be an Episcopalian. They're simply just leave us alone. So, which is why we have an ecumenical movement. Evangelical Protestants, conservative Catholics, Orthodox Jews, Muslims, Mormons. Everybody simply wishes to be left alone so that they can go to heaven. And the guy across the table who completely misunderstands Scripture can go to Hades on his own. But nobody's asking the government to go fix themselves or anybody else. Okay. So around our table, everybody's there. Why? Because on the central issue that moves their vote, maybe not all issues, but on the central issue that moves their vote, they want one thing from the government. They wish to be left alone. Okay? And that's why our coalition holds together. It's why we can work together. Now, it doesn't mean everybody hangs out on Saturday nights doing the same thing. We're not all neighbors. Just people have very different views on how they want to spend their time and their liberty. The guy wants to make money all day, looks across the table at the guy who wants to go to church all day and says, not how I spend my time. And they both kind of look at each other and look over at the guy who wants to fondle his guns all day and say, that's not how we spend our time. But it's not necessary that we all agree what we do with liberty. It's necessary only that we agree we should have a free society. And that includes the government workers whose job it is to help us be left alone. Police. You want to have police to keep bad guys from stealing your stuff or messing with you. You want an army strong enough to keep the Canadians on their side of the border. And so there's a proper role for government, which is to make sure that other people don't mess with us. Sometimes government gets outside that border and starts messing with us. That's when we have an argument. Say, guys, knock it off. Get back to focus on what you're supposed to do to promote liberty, not to impinge on freedom. Now that's our coalition. There's another coalition. The other team gets an act back. I got a call years ago when Hillary Clinton was running for Senate up in New York. And a New York reporter said, well, Hillary Clinton just gave a speech and said what the progressives need. Progressives is, they drove liberal into the ground, okay? They decided they didn't do a word, that's progressive. What progressives need, said Hillary, is one of those meetings like Norquist runs in Washington, D.C. And we have a meeting in a room about this size, put 150 people together every Wednesday for an hour and a half. Nobody talks for more than 3 minutes, including congressmen, senators. And people talk about what they're doing, not what their hopes are, not how deeply they care about things. What are you doing to promote liberty? What are you up to? And then people see how they can work together. Think tanks, activist groups, state legislators, guys from around the country, congressmen, senators, just all the guys together. What are we doing? How can we help? What's going on? And she said, progressives need one of those meetings. And the reporter asked, what do you think of that? And I said, well, then I explained how our coalition works and how we have a low-maintenance coalition because nobody in our coalition wants anything at the expense of anyone else. I want to be able to homeschool. That's fine. I want lower taxes. We're not in conflict. We have different interests, different focus, but there isn't anything you want that steps on my toes, interferes with me. That's how our coalition works together. I said, imagine who sits around Hillary Clinton's table, recently stolen by Barack Obama. Okay. Hey, that's my table. What happened? Okay. But around the left's table, who's there? Well, it's a takings coalition. These are the people who view the proper role of government as taking things from some people and giving them to other people, usually money and usually to them. So around the left's table, trial lawyers, labor union bosses, big city political machines, the two wings of the dependency movement. These are the people who are locked into welfare dependency and the people who make $90,000 a year, managing the dependency of other people, making sure none of them get jobs and become Republicans. Then you go around to the coercive utopians. These are the people who get government grants to explain to their moral inferiors how they have to run their lives. These are the people who mandate that cars are too small to put your entire family into. The people who invented and mandated the toilets that don't flush completely. The people who came up with those light bulbs that convince you have glaucoma. On the Sabbath, you have to separate the green glass from the white glass from the brown glass for the recycling priests. These are the people. They have a list of things you have to do and things you shall not do that is slightly longer and more tedious than Leviticus. It just goes on and on and on, and they intend to enforce it with the state power. So around the left table, now they can work together, they can be cheerful, they can get along, so long as we are stupid enough to keep throwing money into the center of the table. Okay? tax increases, we throw money inside of the table, then everybody around the left's table can be cheerful. There's a scene in the movie after the bank robbery, right? One for you, one for you, one for everybody's happy. One for you, one for you, one for everybody gets money. However, if we do our job correctly, if we say no new taxes, and we mean it, and we hold to it, and the money in the center of the left's table, the Takings Coalition table, begins to dwindle, and all these guys are looking around, and the amount of money is in the middle, and they think they may get left out, then all our friends on the left begin to look at each other around that table a little bit more like the second to the last scene in those lifeboat movies. Now they're wondering who they're going to eat or who they're going to throw overboard. The left is not made up of friends and allies. The left is made up of competing parasites.
Right.
If you don't let them eat taxpayers, they will cheerfully chew on the guy sitting next to them. Now, our job is to stop throwing money in the center of the table so that when we meet the left in 2 years or 4 years, the next election, there are fewer of them and they're somewhat shorter. So, those are the two competing coalitions in American politics. People who want to be left alone, people who view the proper role of government as stealing other people's stuff and giving it to them. And our job is to create more people who are self-reliant, control their own lives, wish to run their own lives, don't wish to tell other people what to do or take their money or organize how they should run their trash collection. And the left's trying to make more people dependent on state power or desirous of aligning with state power. The Taxpayer Protection Pledge that I organized for Americans for Tax Reform from 85, 86, and on, actually by 92, 93, 94, we started to get ivory soap percentages of the modern Republican Party making the commitment not to raise taxes. Okay, we will not raise taxes. Boom. And the Republican Party, again, elected a majority in the House and Senate. People who made that commitment in writing to their constituents. I will not raise taxes. And that was critical to the Republicans taking control of the House and Senate and holding the House and Senate for about 15 years. Now, the Republicans said, if you elect us, we won't raise your taxes. We may invade small countries you can't pronounce, but we will not raise your taxes. And that was pretty good for winning elections and making the case. And if you don't raise taxes, what you have to do is reform government. And so some people say, well, why don't you have a pledge about spending? And the answer is, if tax increases are on the table, if they're an option, then you never get to reform government. Why would you reform government? We'll just do everything we've been doing for 50 years. May not be terribly effective, but it's work to change that. So we'll just do all that. And I've got a new idea, and we'll raise taxes to pay for the new idea. And if we have barnacles on the ship, we'll just add some more barnacles and keep going. However, if you say we're not raising taxes, well then to do something new or different, to respond to new things, you have to look and say, is there anything we've been doing for 10, 20, 50 years that makes sense, or fails to make sense, or is counterproductive, or is destructive of human liberty, that maybe we could stop doing those. Or maybe there's a bunch of good stuff we're doing, but some of them are more important than others. Maybe we could prioritize. Okay? If you don't raise taxes, then you have to govern. You have to make decisions, which is why some people hate the idea of not raising taxes, because then you have to govern. You have to do stuff. You have to say yes to some people and no to some other people who've been very loyal campaign contributors over the years. And this is a problem. So, step one, don't raise taxes. And that was very helpful, and it helped the modern Republican Party recreate itself in a Reagan vision. Matter of fact, branding a party, which Reagan helped to do and which the pledge helped to do, is very important because, prior to that, you didn't know anything about a Republican except he was more north of the Mason-Dixon line. Coca-Cola spends a lot of time branding Coca-Cola. They have high quality control, and they want to make sure that when you buy a Coke, you know what's in there, and you tell everybody else and you're happy. So quality control and branding. You take a Coke bottle from the store, you don't have to look at it and say, well, I need to read the ingredients, I need to ask my friends what's in it, you know what's in it. You know, could I ask the proprietor, could I have a taste of this before I take it home? You know what's in it, take it home. But if you get home and you look down after you've finished 2/3 of the Coke bottle, you look down at the last third of the Coke and there's a rat head in your Coke bottle, you don't say to yourself, you know, I'm thinking perhaps I won't drink all the rest of this Coke bottle tonight. You in fact wonder whether you buy or drink Coke in the future. And you take a picture and you tweet it out to all your friends, and all of a sudden Coke has a real problem. So what's important is that you maintain the brand and protect it. Republican elected officials who vote for tax increases are rat heads in a Coke bottle. Amen. This is not a victimless crime. You damage the brand for everyone else. There are small children who go, Mom, you said that they, and right there I see one. Okay, it confuses people. So maintaining the brand, making sure Republicans don't raise taxes, has been central to moving the party forward and in a governing party. Now, not raising taxes is step one. Step two is stop spending so much money. Yes. And this is where the Tea Party changed the country, the party, and the world. Okay? I get a kick out of the liberals go, what happened to the Tea Party? Well, it moved to Congress, and it stopped the president from doing any more damage. And it changed the world in very dramatic ways. There's a wonderful new PhD study that was done out of somebody's PhD thesis, which says in the 600 plus areas where they found Tea Party rallies in the week of April 15, 2009, compared to places that had planned to have rallies when it rained. So we're not just looking at conservative counties versus liberal counties. Places, we're going to have a rally, and they didn't get to because it rained, okay? And they did a calculation. Republican voter turnout was up 2-3 million more people because of those rallies. Donors were dramatically up. Activists were dramatically up. It brought us to House Representatives. Because, and now you can, why? Well, it seems to me, people show up, they realize other people agree with me, I'm not alone in thinking that all this massive spending is a problem. You make relationships, you say other people have made the sacrifice to go to a rally in the middle of the day, I will too, and people decide to make future decisions and sacrifices of time and effort and treasure to help win elections. This is why the president was not silly or paranoid or overreacting when he sicked the IRS on Tea Party people. He was very wise, okay? But the other team is not stupid, they're evil. And you should never assume stupid, okay? When they do stuff, you don't go, that's pretty dumb. No. It's on purpose, and they did it for a reason. So here we now have the fight. The Republicans will not raise your taxes, and thanks to the Tea Party, they're also focused on spending. The Tea Party made Paul Ryan possible. Now, the Paul Ryan budget, Paul Ryan pathway to the future, basically takes federal spending and it takes the entitlement program and reforms them like Medicare so that they're still there and functioning even if people's life expectancies are long. I mean, our federal government looks and says, gee, if everyone simply dies sooner, the government would work. Okay? How about if we organize government programs around healthy, long-lived people, not organize people's lifespans around the government's Ponzi schemes? So it fixes entitlement programs so that they're there for healthy, long-lived people. 2, it takes all the welfare programs, 185, means-tested welfare programs like aid to families with dependent children and food stamps and Medicaid, about 10 big ones, but 185 total, and it block grants them to the states. And it says, okay, all you guys living in all 57 states, here's the money we're going to give you. You run these programs yourself, okay? And so you have competition with people trying to provide the best government at the lowest cost. Not one size fits all, not treating Alaska like it was the same thing as Florida, but saying, you handle it. And let's have a competition to see who can do well. It's what Bill Clinton signed in 1996. Now, he vetoed it twice, but the third time he signed it was Ronald Reagan's idea from 1971. So if you ever get frustrated, I've got a great idea, how come no one will do it? Okay? Reagan in 1971 said, how about if we block granted welfare? And it passed in 1996 and became law. Our job is to speed up the process between thinking of good ideas and getting them enacted, but understanding it was worth the effort. So when we did that, the Ryan Plan, actually if you pass the Ryan Plan today, it saves about $6 trillion in spending over the next decade from what Obama plans to spend. $6 trillion. Not a bad first start. And then it takes out 40 years. What you have is the federal government will be spending 16.5% of GDP, not 40%. So Obama plans to basically double the size of the federal government. The Ryan Plan would reduce it from its historic level of 18.5% down to 16.5%, from today's 22% down to 16.5%. That was made possible when Republicans learned, you know, voters will reward us for reining in government spending. That's what the Tea Party taught people. Before the Tea Party, people thought, I believe you could not get people to vote against spend too much. Because spend too much is like gaining weight. It doesn't happen on Tuesday. It happens over a long period of time. And you know, oh my goodness, I gained weight. Okay? I should have done something. When? Tuesday, Wednesday, 3 years ago? When? Okay? There's no moment where you go, boom, you gain too much weight. Taxes happen on Tuesday. There's a vote in Congress, in the state legislature, on this particular date, yes, no, tax increases. And so I run Americans for Tax Reform because we're focused on stopping tax increases because then we have people's attention. But the Tea Party demonstrated that what we could do is actually get people concerned about spend too much now, not wait until spend too much became tax too much. So the whole effort, the things that Americans for Prosperity, the Tea Party have organized, the rallies, meetings like this, these have very real impact. Where you have meetings, where you have rallies, in the elections that follow them, you have more voters that care about this stuff. And it's very helpful for political organizers to see that it actually has that positive benefit. So as we move forward, I'm very excited about what North Carolina's legislature, the leader of the Senate, the leader of the House are moving. And again, they're both moving in the right direction. They both want lower tax rates. And they're having a conversation. How quickly can we get there? How do we get there technically and so on? That's called compromise. I'm in favor of compromise towards liberty. I'm not in favor of moving in the wrong direction. That's not compromise. That's losing, okay? But compromising in the right direction, the conversation of how quickly do we get rid of the income tax in North Carolina? How quickly do we get rid of the corporate income tax in North Carolina is a very good question. And keep in mind, when you win in North Carolina, you are helping to instruct activists, elected officials, state legislators in other states. It can be done. And including hopeless, failed states like Illinois and California. At some point, the only way to fix Illinois and California is to have enough successful states like Texas and Florida and hopefully North Carolina that are moving in the right direction, that voters in Illinois can say, we don't have to live like this. Okay? And the guys in East Germany got TV and they realized what was happening in West Germany. They said, we don't have to put up with this anymore. And eventually they didn't. But if you don't convince Illinois and Florida there's a better path, then their politicians can keep lying to them as they slide into failure. So the success of alternative states, of the other states, helps not only the states themselves, not only the other Republican states that will say, hey, that worked, let's do it tomorrow, but it helps in those states that are resistant, most resistant to reform. So as you phase out the income tax, there are people today in San Francisco and San Diego who will thank you 20 years from now and point to the fact that they began to turn around their state when they realized that you could do it here. So I'm delighted to be here with you guys. This has been exciting, and
we're going to